Welcome to another episode of Off the Cuff with Cliff, where you never know where our conversation is going to end up. For those of you that have never seen the show before, this is my co-host Sheba, and we're going to have a conversation, and we never know where the conversation is going to go. You know, I'm going to start off Sheba by telling you today somebody just went off on me, and I still have no idea why they were yelling at me.
I'm
Is that
sorry.
crazy?
That's crazy. That's a horrible way to start your
But
day.
before we talk, Sheba, introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, everyone. I'm Sheba Doherty, and I'm happy to be here today, Cliff.
Very good. So this person went off on me, and you and I had a discussion a while back. I think somebody went off on you because you took their
Hmm.
parking spot or something, and then you did some research, right?
Yes.
And so you told me something about, I don't know, you gave me a definition on how people need to balance themselves.
Oh, I was talking about emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence. Is that
Yes.
anything like AI?
No, it is nothing like AI. It's actually quite the opposite. For those of you in our audience who don't know what emotional intelligence is, it is the ability to manage your emotions and as well as understand and recognize the emotions of other people.
Okay. So it's about reading people and how people respond.
Yes, reading people and also controlling and being in tune with your own emotions as well.
Okay. And that's a good point because as this person was going off on me,
Clear control.
I had no idea why they were even mad at me, but I just took it as the person was having a bad day, and I just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Does that
Right.
happen? And
Yeah.
so emotional intelligence, when we talked about the incident that you had with the parking space, you could tell from people's body language sometimes too, right?
Oh, yeah, you can tell when someone's ready for a fight or a
And it might
conflict.
not have anything to do with
Probably
you.
nothing to do with you. Yeah,
And
yeah.
we had discussed it. We had discussed it on another episode. I'm the type of person. My personality is if there's going to be a conflict, I'm gonna make the conflict happen. Why? Because I wanna bring it to a head. I wanna settle and move on, right? And sometimes, I think in the past, I probably was what do you call it? I would go off on the simplest thing, and I
Okay.
blame blood pressure. I blame how much sugar I had that day. I convinced myself that it was okay to do that. You think it happens to a lot of people?
I think so. I can relate to some degree. I never was the one that would go off, but I if someone set me off, I was like I was in for the fight. I was in. But now I've evolved to I actually like to diffuse that person and confuse them.
Okay.
So I like to use emotional intelligence trickery, I call it.
So give me an example of your trickery.
I was in a supermarket where you're at the cash register and something isn't registering, right? It was the woman in front of me. So now the line stops. So the guy behind us is, can you just get going?
Yeah, yeah,
Can
yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
just, and the girl, the cashier is having a conversation with the woman and guy's getting more angry and he's getting more angry. And now he starts to scream.
Okay.
And so I basically just started talking to all the people around me and saying how it's so unfair because the girl's just doing her job. She's stressed out. She doesn't want the line to be stopped. I'm sure the woman in front is just as much in a rush as the rest of us. So let's give them a little support. And the guy just immediately just diffused.
Okay. So can we go off the cuff a second?
Yeah.
Because you just reminded me of something. Not too long ago, I was at a store, and I'm at the store, and the person, I guess, 1 or 2 people in front of me, that's not really important, and they asked for something. I think it might have been a price or she had a question, and the girl who was at the register took her phone out,
Uh-huh.
and she started texting, and I'm standing back there, and I'm not in any rush or anything, but I'm like, "How why is this person on the phone texting when obviously this person has a question for him?" And the person between me and her, you can see him getting very agitated.
Right.
And I'm standing there and I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, how long is this going to actually take? And so I'm passing judgment on this poor girl that's on the phone and she's texting back and forth. And the lady is looking at her, what the hell are you doing? The guy is getting aggravated. I'm getting aggravated because the guy is getting aggravated and the lady's not getting it. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? All of a sudden, out of the clear blue, she takes the phone, she looks at it, she looks up at the lady and she says, blah, 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 blah. And so the woman looked at her and the guy said to her, he didn't realize that she gave her the answer she was looking for. He snaps at her and says, "Why are you on your phone?" And she said, "I'm texting the manager to get her answer." So this poor person was actually
Right.
doing her job with
Doing
her
her
phone.
job.
She was using technology to get the message
Yes.
out. I felt stupid because I'm there. I'm getting upset because this guy's upset.
'Cause
Um,
everyone's wondering why she's on her phone.
and in the
Yeah.
meantime, she answered. She's solving the problem for
Yeah.
the woman. She solved the problem, but the guy didn't realize she solved the problem, and he
Right.
went off on her because of the way it was.
Yeah.
So those things happen, and sometimes I think we sometimes I know in the past I've looked at people and said, "Why?"
Right.
When I wasn't there when the story started, what's going on and where
Right.
it's gonna end.
I think I try and live my life with as little conflict as possible. But I think any of us who are in relationships can say that's the one area that you're prone to having conflict, right?
Right.
With your significant other. And I do a lot of self help reading and things like that. So now when my husband and I do get into a disagreement, one of the first things I say to him is, fair enough.
Fair enough.
And I put my hands up. And my husband's very fiery. I'm going to go off the cuff. Are you Irish at all, or do you have any?
Yeah, I have some Irish in me.
Okay. So Irish men in particular are known to be emotional volcanoes. So
Okay,
what they do is they keep everything in, they
okay,
keep everything in, and then they erupt.
okay,
But when they erupt twice a year, they bring all this stuff up that you did wrong
okay,
6 months ago.
okay.
And I always scream, nope, statute of limitations. You can't bring that up because you didn't bring it. So if any of you have any family members or are Irish yourself, you can probably relate to that.
Because you asked the question, I'm Italian, Irish, and English.
Okay.
So I got that little bit of what you said, but I'm not the volcano that sits to wait for the cap to come off. I'm more Italian than anything else. So when my Italian temper flares, it flares,
Yeah.
right? And when I go off.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I've learned that I probably done a disjustice to a lot of people, and I've been in business, so I probably did an injustice to my employees too, because
Mhm.
sometimes I would snap at the smallest thing. And most of the time, I know I found myself, and maybe it is the volcano piece, and I didn't think of the Irish thing, and I got to look that up. I don't know what scientific fact you're talking about, but there are times where things are building up, and then you all of a sudden snap over something that's you're not really mad at it, but you get
Right.
to that point,
Yeah, you
right?
just get to that point. But the problem is that the people around you aren't really hearing you at that point. Because when you snap and you lose your temper, you've lost your audience.
Okay,
They're not listening to you anymore.
okay,
So, like, when my husband and I are having a disagreement and I put my hands up in the air and I say, fair enough, it immediately, I know it annoys the crap out of him,
okay.
but it diffuses the situation because now I've just agreed with him. So I've basically said, I'm not fighting. Like, fair enough.
Does he take it though as an indifference? I think if my wife did that to me, I would take it as indifference.
No, he doesn't because then I allow him to speak and then he feels heard because part of why a fight escalates is you're trying to talk over one another.
Oh,
So you don't allow the other person to feel heard. So when you say fair enough and sit back, and it doesn't have to be the words fair enough. It could be your body language, any
okay,
conflict in your life. So it could be your body language. It could be a different sentence you say. But when you basically tell that person, give them any message on any level, I am willing to hear you out.
okay,
You're immediately going to diffuse it.
right. So if you're angry and I start talking lower and
Yes.
lower, what happens?
People start to listen.
And not only are they listening, but what happens to their tone? They
They
don't
start
real
to get low
they get lower and
because
lower.
they don't feel the need to shout over you
Right,
because you're no longer
right,
shouting.
right. So that's a diffusing tactic that I learned at a conflict management seminar.
Right.
Is when people get upset with, just start talking lower and lower because the
Right.
louder they are, the lower you get.
Yeah.
They start talking lower, don't even realize that it's
Right.
happening.
We're talking about conflict and not with emotional intelligence, but this week, a few weeks in particular, I've had a lot of stuff going on in my life with people that I love, going through some really hard times. And emotional intelligence has been a conversation I've been having with my kids a lot
Okay.
because I've had some really important people in my life going through some really tough times. And I want to be there for them to support them. And another layer of emotional intelligence is recognizing other people's emotions.
Okay.
And one thing I think people struggle with is being able to sit with someone in their grief
Okay.
when someone is going through something or grieving something, people feel very uncomfortable. And I think a sign of emotional intelligence is the people that can come to that person and rather than come to them as a solution, just come to them as a comrade, as someone who's willing to sit in the trench with them
Right.
and say, you know what, this is really horrible. And this is really, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. Because if you put yourself in their shoes, we've all been there.
Right.
People don't want you fixing when you're in a bad space. People want you to support them.
They just want you to listen.
They just want you to listen.
Sure. Sure.
And they don't want you to say, "Oh, it'll be okay." How do you know it's gonna be
Right.
okay?
Right.
And then it just feels disingenuous. But if you say, I'm so sorry. You guys don't deserve this, and I'm here for you. Call me anytime. I will sit down and talk with you. Call me to scream, call me to cry." It gives them now that
Gives them events.
it gives them a vent,
Sure.
and it gives them that permission to be human and share that experience with someone else. And that's a really strong key to emotional intelligence that I'm trying to teach my teenagers now.
So you're talking about teenagers, right? So my children are obviously older and we lived in a different time. But how are your feelings with your children because they're so involved in social media and stuff like that? Do you think that takes away the emotion? Do you think because I know a lot of children or I know some, my grandchildren, for example, they don't
Mhm,
know how to have an argument. They can just say, "Oh," and that's it, and they're gonna
mhm.
ghost you, or you have the people, the warriors, what do they call them?
Keyboard
Keyboard
warriors.
warriors that are bullies online and they're tough
Yes,
and they really put people down, and then you got
yes.
people reading that, and they really it's a different type of emotion, right? It's a different type of attack.
The screen allows you to actually disconnect emotionally, which I think is really damaging because at the end of the day, life is about connections,
Right.
whether it's positive or negative. And I do think that the screen has pretty much destroyed that. Have you ever been on a in a text exchange with someone
Oh,
and they
yeah,
might have gotten
yeah,
offended by
yeah,
something
yeah,
because they couldn't tell your tone in the text,
correct,
but the tone they took was not the tone you
correct,
intended,
correct.
and now you have to explain to them,
The same
"That's
thing
not
in
what I
emails,
meant."
right? The same
The
thing in
same
email
thing in
with business,
emails.
right?
You
You send
you
an
can't
email and
read
like
tone in
you
an email.
correct, and I think video is very important, and the different video services and stuff that are out there, and I think maybe in the future there might be something coming out that can do
Right.
that. We have all of these different types of apps and stuff, but I'm in agreement with you. I think when I get a text message and don't know the tone, then you got this whole emoji thing, right?
Right?
So you got these emojis
Yes.
and people put the emojis on. Now, I'm not that sophisticated, but when somebody sends me the emoji, sometimes I have to go to Wikipedia and say, what does this emoji mean? Because I don't know what the emoji means because I
Right.
don't live in that world every day.
Yes.
But it is a way of tying an emotion,
Yes.
right, to that,
To
right?
that. Yeah.
So what's your favorite emoji?
I use emojis only with my children and my very close friends because apparently emojis are like an old person thing.
Okay. So,
What is my favorite emoji? Obviously the heart, and I do a lot of exos. That's mostly for my kids. I do a lot of hearts with my friends too. I probably overuse it in my friend groups too, but
okay.
everyone knows I'm a mushy person.
Okay. So my favorite one is the poop.
Oh, you like the poop?
I like poop because I don't give a poop, right?
I like the
So if we go back to emotional intelligence, I used to let everything bother me, right? If the smallest thing would bother me because I've owned businesses and you're in it 24/7. It's like raising a kid. And when somebody says something, it doesn't really resonate with. So I would take stuff personally. I would take stuff even like this, where we're doing a video right now, where, oh, I don't like the way my hair looks or something
mm,
like that.
right.
And I'd be very critical of myself. But when I learned if I really didn't care, the things that I'm noticing isn't anything anybody else is noticing. And
Mm,
for the most of the time, why am I responding to somebody else when they really don't affect my life? And I think you used the words you try to read people. And I think everybody's body language, but I think some people are just so what's the right word? So null. They're so nothing bothers them because they don't know how to share their emotion.
that can go twofold. So emotion you just said something that touched on with me that emotional the regulation of your emotions, emotional intelligence is regulating your emotions to not to the point where you're apathetic, where you don't
Okay.
care.
Okay.
It's being in control, and actually, it's quite the opposite. It's actually being very conscious of your emotions and not really allowing other people or external forces to jar that.
Okay.
That if you are sitting in comfort where you feel about it, don't let the opinions of others
Right.
in.
Because again, I'm gonna go back years ago where I was the person that would force the confrontation. And I'm still guilty of it now in that, you know what, if I know I'm gonna trigger you, I'm gonna trigger
You're
you.
gonna trigger.
I'm gonna trigger you because I look at if I'm renting space in your head, that's actually a good thing. Whether it's good or bad, I'm taking space in your head.
I'm gonna go off the cuff. Were you on a debate team?
Oh yeah, I was on the debate team.
Okay. Okay,
I was on a
so
debate team.
you're one of those people that, like, you just like a good debate. Like, you just like you like a challenge.
Okay, so yeah, so I do, I'm gonna brag a little bit. I went to a very small Catholic school, and we went to nationals twice where we probably shouldn't have been eligible, only because the way I would debate is I would go off topic, and by going off topic, I would change things, and the other
Mm,
team wouldn't have the evidence. I don't want to go through the rules of the debate, but
alright,
there was no way they could argue and have the supporting document because
interesting.
I just took whatever you wanted, and I twisted it in a different way.
Right.
And I was the person that even if I was on the negative, which meant the other person was the affirmative, going
Mhm.
supporting, I would change the subject and tie it in some way that they'd have
Right.
no
And the
way to go.
tangent would completely throw them off.
Well, there was no way they could
Yeah,
respond
they
because
couldn't
you have to have
respond.
evidence, you have to have proof of what you're
Right,
saying.
so debate's over.
So
You
the
win.
debate's over. But I don't know if I necessarily like a debate because I like to be prepared and I like to win, but sometimes I catch myself like, why am I taking it to this extreme? My son likes to debate with me just for the sake of to get under my skin. He'll debate with me on topics that I know he doesn't really care about just to see my reaction.
Right,
So I
okay,
just figured out that's how he triggers.
okay,
I got you,
interesting.
Renee. I got you.
We could do a whole bunch of more series on emotional intelligence, but I think, um, it's a life skill for
Okay.
sure. I think it's a skill that unfortunately younger people struggle with, and as a mom of 3 now teenagers, I almost teenagers, I it's something that I really try and push every day with my
Right.
kids to make
Right.
them really aware.
And we're just talking about it as two people. We're not doctors. We're not
Correct.
professional anything. We're just taking a soft skill and saying, "Hey, how much has of it changed?" And, you know, but I think in order for somebody to want to recognize, they need to recognize first that they're doing it before they can control it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that's the part too, is most of us, and myself included, is you don't even realize you're doing it, right? Because life is about what? It's about three things, right? It's either fight, flight,
Flight.
or fright.
Yeah.
So we're geared to have that confrontation. We're geared to question things and stuff
Mhm.
like. But to your point, it depends to what degree I want to take it.
Correct. Exactly.
All
Exactly.
right, great talking to you, Sheba. I think it's great. Those of you that are watching, please watch the video at the end of this to keep us moving forward. We appreciate you. Thank you for watching. And Sheba, I'll see you on the next show.
Sounds good, Cliff.